Hey, this is Derek, and listening to Skepticality, the official podcast of Skeptic Magazine, for Tuesday, July 3rd, 2012. Skepticality. Science! Welcome back to another episode of Skepticality, the program that brings you news, information, and interviews with skeptics and scientists and critical thinkers from all walks of life for the promotion of critical thinking and science. So this episode is going to be a tad long, mainly because you won't hear another episode of Skepticality until July 31st. We have a lot of stuff going on between now and then. In fact, I'm going to save a little bit of time to make sure I cram all the stuff into this episode I want to. So to do that, I'm going to cut down a lot of little commentary in between little segments. So, speaking of things I have to do between now and that next episode, is TAM. And it's only a few days until TAM, the amazing meeting. Hopefully, I'll get to see some of you there. If so, make sure you come to the workshop that will feature myself and is being put together by Tim Farley. Speaking of Tim, I think it's again time to check with the past and the future.
I'm Tim Farley of whatstheharm.net and skeptools.com, and this is Skepticism, Past and Future. With the amazing meeting, or TAM 2012, coming up in Las Vegas, I thought it would be appropriate to talk a little bit about the history of TAM, and then provide some high-tech tips on enjoying this year's show. The James Randi Educational Foundation was incorporated on Leap Day in 1996. It was set up to further the work of James Randi in combating charlatans and frauds in the realms of pseudoscience and the paranormal. Aside from Mr. Randi's multiple speaking and media engagements, the foundation published a regular newsletter, which eventually became the basis of a website, randi.org. On July 23, 2001, the JREF forum opened up to the public and rapidly became a hugely popular feature of the website. In those days, prior to Twitter and Facebook, it soon became an excellent place for skeptics to gather online. Just a few weeks after its launch, Randi himself admitted that he had been only mildly enthused over the idea, but realized his mistake when it reached 548 registered members from 36 countries in just over 2 weeks. Clearly, there was a demand for a skeptic gathering place. The community on the forum quickly grew, and the idea of a face-to-face gathering began on the urging of forum member Girl 6. What the forum members didn't know at the time was that JREF's Linda Schallenberger was already quietly planning such a meeting. When the meeting was announced in Randi's newsletter on June 14, 2002, the forum rallied around the idea. A poll was even held on what date to have it. In the following years, the forum community would be a key part of TAM, providing volunteers, the grant program for needy attendees, and more. On July 12, 2002, Randi announced that the upcoming meeting would be called The Amazing Meeting, and it would be held January 31st to February 2nd, 2003 in Florida near the JREF headquarters. Many speakers still familiar to TAM attendees, such as Phil Plait, Robert Todd Carroll, and Michael Shermer, were included in the guest list. An unfortunate but momentous event occurred during that first TAM. The Space Shuttle Columbia was returning to Earth on the morning of Saturday, February 1st, 2003, the second day of TAM. Following Michael Shermer's talk, MC Hal Bidlack came up on stage to announce that the vehicle and all aboard had been lost during re-entry. An unscheduled 1-hour break was taken, and people gathered around a TV in the lobby. After the break, the rest of the event went on. The first TAM was a huge success, and planning began quickly for a second annual event for the next year. TAM 2 saw the event move to Las Vegas, where it has been held ever since. The Las Vegas TAMs were held at various hotels for the next several years, including the Tuscany, the Stardust, the Riviera, and the Flamingo. Up until TAM 5, they were always held in January. After that, the decision was made to move TAM to the summer, to encourage more educators to attend during their summer break from classes. Because that meant there would be 18 months between events, a smaller event, TAM 5.5, was held between numbers 5 and 6 back in Florida in January of 2008. Since TAM 7, held July 9th through 12th, 2009, the event has been held at the South Point Hotel, Casino, and Resort in July of every year. In addition, several international TAMs have been held in London in October 2009 and October 2010, and in Sydney, Australia in November 2010. As a result of all that, even though last year was TAM 9, this year's TAM 2012 is actually the 14th amazing meeting, 11 in the U.S. and 3 overseas. It is the 9th one that has been held in Las Vegas. As many of us get ready to attend TAM 2012 next week, there are many online resources that you can use to gather information, contact your fellow attendees, and so on. Of course, there's the main TAM website at amazingmeeting.com, which has the guest list, program schedule, and so on. You can also get information about the conference hotel at southpointcasino.com. I've also copied the entire schedule and guest list to the event scheduling site lanyard.com, which I discussed in this segment back in March in episode number 179. Not only does the site allow you to browse the schedule, sync it to your personal calendar, and find all the speakers on Twitter, but they also have a smartphone version that lets you access all the information on the go. Another great resource is the JREF forum, previously mentioned at forums.randy.org. There's a section there devoted to the amazing meeting, and as the show approaches, all sorts of planning for side trips, meetups, and so on happens. If you've never attended TAM before, this is a great place to meet some of the attendees in advance. A big part of modern events is live reports as the event goes on via Twitter, Facebook, and live blogs. In order to make this happen, you'll need wireless internet access while at the show. I've written an extensive blog post at skeptools.com that covers all your options here, such as Wi-Fi, 3G, and 4G, including some price comparison charts. You can take advantage of all that live reporting from the show simply by using Twitter search, whether or not you have an account there, to search for the hashtag TAM2012. There's a direct link in the show notes. I will be at TAM 2012 and present my workshop on crowdsourced skepticism on Thursday. I will also participate in a panel on Friday and give a plenary talk on Sunday afternoon. This is my biggest contribution to TAM yet, and I hope to see you all there. And this brings us to the end of another edition of Skepticism Past and Future. Links to additional material are in the show notes, and follow me on Twitter or Facebook under the name Krelnick, Krelnik, for a daily fact from skepticism's past and ongoing news of skepticism's future.
This is Bob Carroll, creator of the Skeptic's Dictionary and the blog Unnatural Acts That Can Improve Your Thinking. Welcome to another episode of Unnatural Virtue. In this and future episodes, I'll be offering some brief comments on topics in critical thinking, skepticism, and science. Today's topic is fake healing. Not faith healing, but fake healing. Once upon a time, there were two shamans who lived on opposite sides of the earth. Both shamans were loved by their respective tribes. One shaman discovered that no matter what medicine he used, most of his patients recovered. He discovered that it wasn't the medicine that gave relief to those who beat a path to his hut. He knew he was tricking them. He may have figured out that what gave relief to his patients were his rituals, the confidence he exuded in his ability to contact the spirit world, the expectation of healing that his community shared, the power of his suggestions, or that most illnesses resolve themselves in due time. He may even have been wise enough to recognize that most of his patients were scared, and that fear was in some important way related to their symptoms. Reducing fear helped his patients recover. The medicine was usually irrelevant. Calming down his patients, what we call reducing anxiety, was the important thing. The other shaman was not so enlightened, and he believed it was his powerful medicine and contacts that healed people. He was a good shaman and had many satisfied customers. The enlightened shaman made a conscious decision to continue with the traditional rituals and medicines because they worked, even though he knew they weren't efficacious. After all, if he told his fellow tribe members what he discovered, he'd destroy their faith. Rather than be grateful for knowing the truth, they might turn on him. So he continued with the deceit, justifying it by telling himself that he was, after all, helping people, and if he didn't do it, somebody else would. His decision was made easier, knowing that if he revealed what he knew, he'd have to spend the rest of his days as an outcast, jobless and hated. Like the unenlightened shaman, the enlightened deceiver could always come up with a satisfying narrative to explain why his failures weren't really failures. He could rely on people's gullibility and their willingness to believe just about anything magical, mysterious, and involving powerful spirits from another world. One of the more interesting fake healers debuted in Paris in the 18th century. Franz Anton Mesmer had many ladies convinced he could heal them by using magnets to tap into a new force that he called animal magnetism. He eventually figured out that he didn't need the magnets. Just waving his hands did the trick. Modern-day nurses practicing therapeutic touch seem to have hit upon the same formula, though they've replaced animal magnetism with some sort of mysterious energy called chi or prana. Aura healers, chakra healers, and various types of energy healers have been practicing a similar craft under different names in different countries for centuries. In Japan, for example, the practice is known as Reiki. Like the shamans, these healers have their rituals too, and they have had many satisfied customers. They've provided relief from such things as swelling, pain, nausea, headaches, anxiety, and an assortment of other ailments without the use of real medicine or surgery. And some of these healers have found that they can bring relief to their patients without even touching them or giving them any medicine at all. Some have found they can get the same results whether the patient is present or 1,000 miles away. Like our unenlightened shaman, many of these energy healers have not awakened to the fact that most of their patients will recover no matter what they do. Personally, I found that nothing brings relief from anxiety like the comforting touch of someone who seems to care about me. Then there are the ones we commonly call faith healers, the Peter Popoffs and Benny Hinns of the world. These are the ones who know they're duping their clients. They callously take advantage of people in dire straits who believe in supernatural powers. They're joined by some unenlightened faith healers who really do think some god or spirit causes all illness and healing requires divine intervention. Unlike the shamans and energy healers with their many satisfied customers, however, we usually only hear about these unenlightened faith healers when one of their clients dies for lack of proper medical care. Often enough, the victim is one of their own children. Finally, there are the New Age healers who make no claims about the spirit world or mysterious energies, but who focus on patients whose main hurt is fear or stress itself. These healers often combine scientifically validated methods like cognitive behavioral therapy with the relaxation and stress-reducing techniques known to shamans, energy healers, and faith healers. The New Age healers have their own little rituals like waving a crystal wand, rubbing various gemstones, placing weak magnets in various items, having the patient follow a light source moved by the healer, or tapping on various parts of the patient's body. There are various explanations given by fake healers for what they think is going on in these healing experiences. Some of the explanations are rather simple, like the Chinese theory of qi running along meridians and occasionally getting blocked or clogged, thereby causing illness and disease. The energy healing is thought to unblock, unclog, move, or transfer energy, and that somehow brings about healing. Some of the explanations are rather elaborate and involve reference to such things as vibrating subatomic particles, tachyonic energy, biofields, quantum mechanics, transcendent beings, extraneous energy trapped between cells, astral bodies, rewiring or restructuring the brain, or repatterning of neural pathways. These explanations, however clever they might be, have very little plausibility. Is there any science that supports these various forms of fake healing, or the explanations of how they work that have been proposed in their defense? Some say no, that it's all a matter of faith, and that these methods won't work for non-believers. Others think there's a growing body of scientific evidence supporting the efficacy of various types of fake healing. I've looked at much of this evidence, and I'd say that there is a growing body of evidence that many of the fake healing techniques I've mentioned work, when they do work, by the power of suggestion, by relaxing the patient and reducing stress, by allowing symptoms to resolve themselves, by regression to the mean, and by a host of other factors that have glibly been referred to as the placebo effect. When New Age therapies work, it seems that it is because they are built around a core of cognitive behavioral therapy, which they combine with their own unique rituals and the same kinds of things that work for other fake healers. Fake healing is a grand illusion that has been around for as long as human communities have had healers. Is it a harmful delusion? Some, like Benny Hinn and Peter Popoff, take advantage of the delusion for their own fun and profit. Others really believe they are powerful healers, but they have no idea of the real reasons their patients improve. Some bring about their own child's death because of their belief in faith healing. Some adult patients die because they choose to undergo some form of fake healing rather than see a science-based medical practitioner for an easily treatable condition. So yes, the fake healing delusion can be dangerous and hazardous to your health and the health of your loved ones. Consider, for example, what happened to two energy healers who both died because they used their own form of energy healing instead of seeking proper medical treatment for diabetes and an infection. Mary A. Lynch, a retired physician, and Deborah Harrison, a massage therapist, created consegrity, a type of energy medicine that involves a belief that disease is caused by extraneous energy being trapped between cells. Through their own form of ritual hocus pocus, they thought they could release this bad energy and thereby bring about healing. Harrison was a diabetic. She died in 2005 while being treated by Lynch with consegrity. Presumably, Dr. Lynch provided the best healing energy that consegrity can give, but was unable to assist Harrison with lowering her blood sugar below 900 milligrams per deciliter, which is what it measured at her death at age 55. The type of diabetes that Harrison had doesn't resolve itself. Had she another type of diabetes, she might have controlled it with diet and exercise. Of course, given her investment in consegrity, in her mind, any recovery she might have made would have been due to the energy healing. We might forgive Harrison, who was not trained in medicine, for her folly. Dr. Lynch is more puzzling. She was educated at a fine medical school and had practiced sports medicine for many years before turning to energy healing. A correspondent informed me that Lynch had a toe infection that she tried to treat with consegrity. She refused antibiotics and eventually had the toe amputated. She continued to refuse antibiotics, left the hospital, and died at home from septic shock. She was 65. Many infections do resolve themselves. Unfortunately, some infections kill their hosts. You can bet, however, that the followers of consegrity will find a way to rationalize these failures. Well, that's it for this episode of Unnatural Virtue. For more on energy healing, faith healing, and consegrity, see those entries in the Skeptic's Dictionary. In the meantime, please commit some unnatural acts in public. And don't forget, skepticism, though unnatural, is a virtue.
Thanks again to Tim and Bob for the hard work they do to get their insight and content on our show here. Make sure you go to a link in our show notes to get your own copy of Bob Carroll's book from Amazon. It makes a great addition to any skeptic or critical thinker's library. Earlier, I talked about The Amazing Meeting. Well, The Amazing Meeting is in Vegas. And as usual, we have some odds handlers to check in with.
Hello, and welcome to The Odds Must Be Crazy on Skepticality, where the ordinary meets the extraordinary. And then that guy you used to play pool with in college randomly shows up and asks for his $10 back. I'm Jarrett Kaufman.
And I'm Wendy Hughes, and we're here to get jiggy with today's story, or whatever similar phrase is appropriate to today's youth.
Hi, Wendy. Did you pick out a story for this week?
Of course I did, Jarrett, or we wouldn't have bothered to record this, now would we? Today's story comes to us courtesy of blog reader Bob LeDrew, and it can be found on our blog today by searching for Put Your Mother on the Phone, also linked to in the show notes. Bob's funny and amazing story begins.
When I was a kid, I was at home one evening and the phone rang. I picked it up and said, "Hello?" "Hi, is that Bob?" "Yes." "Put your mother on the phone." "Can I tell her who's calling?" "Oh, come on, Bob. Stop messing around and put Evelyn on the phone." My mom's name is Evelyn, but I didn't know the voice and started to get a little creeped out by the presumption. We went back and forth, each of us getting irritated. "Are you sure you've dialed the right number?" "Is this 736 XXXX?" "Yes." "Then put Evelyn on." I was flummoxed. This person wouldn't say who they were. I didn't recognize their voice, but they knew my name, my mother's name, and had the right phone number. Somewhere in my brain, something made me ask, "What area code did you dial?" "702. We were in 902, the area code for Nova Scotia, Canada. 702 is Las Vegas. I explained this to the person on the other end of the line. She hung up, and I ran to tell my parents that somewhere in Nevada there was someone with our phone number named Evelyn who had a son named Bob. Crazy.
This story of a really, really wrong, yet nearly very right phone number seems nearly impossible, but it's our job to dial back the confusion without the help of a phone book.
So our friend and probability operator Barbara Drescher shared her thoughts with us. In fact, she shared a lot of her thoughts, and even her own parallel story. For the sake of brevity, we're going to strongly suggest visiting the site for the story, which gets alluded to in her comments, and the drastically more involved and interesting results.
So let's use some of Barbara's information to break this down. First, what is the probability of the names of the people in the story being the same?
Barbara says, "I am not surprised at all that there is a common name in the submitted story and my own. According to BabyCenter.com, Robert was the #1 name for baby boys for decades and has not left the top 100 in more than a century. Evelyn has not been in the top 10 since 1915, but it was in the top 100 until 1953, then dropped in popularity somewhat until 2008 when it returned to the top 100. If we assume the mother in this story was born when her name was rather popular, but recently enough for this to happen after area codes were in use, I will guess that this occurred in the 1980s. If 3 in 1,000 of the women in this age group are named Evelyn, and 25 in 1,000 boys 8 to 18 years old were named Robert, then the probability of a mother and son having the names Bob and Evelyn, as opposed to any other configuration, are approximately 3 in 40,000. Less than 10% of households in 1985 did not have phones. So let's say that there were 4,200 Bob/Evelyns who could receive the call.
What does Barbara say about the same names at the same phone numbers?
Where this gets much trickier is in estimating the probabilities related to the phone numbers. There were limits to the possible phone numbers at the time. However, we can get close to this by estimating the probability that someone would reach those people by dialing a 10-digit number incorrectly. TradingEconomics.com estimates the number of fixed and mobile telephone lines in the U.S. in 1985 at over 116 million. With 6,000 of those answering to Bob and Evelyn, that's more than 1 in 20,000.
So far, so good. Sounds like we're narrowing in on some real figures.
If you only dial one number incorrectly, the number of ways to dial 10 digits incorrectly is 100. But depending on which number you dialed incorrectly, the odds of reaching a person are actually small, given that fewer than 1 in 50 of the possible combinations of 10 digits was in use at the time. So let's assume, again conservatively, that 2 of the numbers you could dial incorrectly would reach an actual phone. The odds, then, of reaching one of the 4,200 Bob and Evelyn pairings by dialing a single number incorrectly are 7 in 1 million.
7 in a million? I was hoping for the cliched 1 in a million.
Still, you gotta admit, that's a lot of ringy-dingies.
Thanks for listening to The Odds Must Be Crazy on Skepticality. Please be sure to visit theoddsmustbecrazy.com and share your thoughts, comments, and corrections, no matter how brutal. Or nice. We'll lean on nice.
Don't forget to follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook, circle us on Google+, and validate us in life. Hit the Submit a Story link on our site to share your own crazy stories, or tweet the short ones with the hashtag TOMBC.
The Odds Must Be Crazy is a project in collaboration with the Independent Investigations Group in Los Angeles, California. Visit them at iigwest.org. Barbara Drescher is a contributing editor to our blog and can also be found at icbseverywhere.com.
Special thanks to our producer and sound engineer, Brian Hart. Our theme music comes to us courtesy of Mr. Deity himself, Brian Keith Dalton. You can find him at MrDeity.com.
And until next time, remember, put your phone on vibrate before the feature begins.
So, I'm here with Todd. Is it Stiefel?
It is Stiefel.
Hey.
It rhymes with gleeful.
I'm another person with the weird last name that's easy to say, but everybody gets it wrong. So, Colin Doone's pretty easy, but, people like to try to make a trick out of it, but it doesn't work that way. I'll have you tell people a little about who you are.
Okay, sure. I'm the founder and president of the Stiefel Free Thought Foundation. We strive to gain respect for free thinkers and ensure the complete separation of church and state. I'm essentially a full-time free thought activist and have been involved with all sorts of things in the movement, including the Reason Rally and Rock Beyond Belief. And oh boy, I try to keep busy, and right now I'm leading a big project with Foundation Beyond Belief to raise $1 million for the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society.
And that's actually why I have you on today.
Indeed, how about that?
Hey.
Like that segue?
Well, yeah, really. But you know what, before we get into that, let's talk a little bit about the couple of things you talked about before. I mean, you've been involved with before. The Rock Beyond Belief, that had a rocky start.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That was a wild adventure. It all started with Rock the Fort, which was a Billy Graham Evangelical Association series of events. But I learned about it coming to Fort Bragg just like a few days before it actually took place, and quickly scrambled and worked with Americans United, and we tried to get it stopped, but we learned about it just a little too late to really get any kind of lawsuit filed or injunction. So we were unable to stop it, and then shifted modes and started thinking about potentially basically challenging their fairness and open forum by putting on our own event. And while thinking about that, I see a post on Hemant Mehta's Friendly Atheist that this guy, Sergeant Justin Griffith, was planning on doing an event. I was like, hey, that's the idea we were thinking about. This guy's actually going to do it. So I got his info, called him up, and we proceeded from there. And he pretty much led the charge with his team on the logistical side, and I helped with a little strategy, and my foundation funded it.
Now, there was a little bit of a rocky road to get it actually accepted at the beginning, I knew about. Yeah,
they said they agreed, and then they said no, and there was a lot of back and forth and a lot of times where it seemed like it was going to happen and seemed like it wouldn't happen. They definitely declined it at one point, and we had to get the lawyers involved to pretty much say, you have to do this or you have to shut down all of these type of events, which frankly we were hoping they would just stop all events. And by all events, I mean all religiously motivated events. The Billy Graham event was specifically a proselytizing event. They even point blank said in the documentation that it was designed to bring the message of the gospel to soldiers, their families, civilians, and the children of civilians.
Yeah.
Which is a scary thought when the world's most powerful military is using its might to convert minority believers
into a specific sect of Christianity. And we worked through it. I mean, I have to give Justin a lot of credit. He was tough. He did a lot of negotiating behind the scenes, and we leveraged a strong network of lawyers between a variety of organizations to really kind of put the pressure on them. And ultimately, I guess the military's lawyers pretty much told them, you have to do this. You don't really have much choice, or you're going to get sued and lose. So they very begrudgingly agreed to let us do the event after canceling it initially. And we ended up doing it. It took like a year and a half to actually have it happen. And when it did, it still wasn't completely equal. Like for Rock the Fort, the Billy Graham event, the Chaplains Corps really, really pushed the event, spent a lot of time and effort promoting it around base. They contacted local churches and encouraged them to take part. And for us, radio silence, nothing, no support, no help, nothing, which kind of goes against the whole, the chaplains are there for everybody. It's like, no, they're pretty much there, at least in this case, if you're an evangelical Christian. If not, they have no interest in supporting. But it was worth it. It was worth it to test them, to challenge them, and force the government to be fair to all groups that want to do such things. And hopefully they learn their lesson and stop putting on proselytizing events. But they look, so far there's nothing else going on that we know of at Fort Bragg, but they are still doing similar type events at other bases. So there's current talk of a possible Rock Beyond Belief 2 in San Diego.
Well, that'd be cool. I have some friends in San Diego, so.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of hope it doesn't happen, because I hope the military just puts a clamp down on all of these kind of proselytizing events.
Yeah.
But if they're not, the price is you got to do it for everybody.
Well, that's kind of the tack that we've always had to use when it comes to the religious displays during Christmas time on city land. It's, it's like, if you're going to make it equal for everybody, I have no problem with it. But that's the only real tack you can really take with it.
Exactly. So we ended up having a cool event. I mean, it was a good time. We got to put on a good show for the soldiers and their families. There's a lot of military people there. The weather didn't really cooperate with us very much, but we had great speakers. We had Dawkins, and Hemmett was there, and a whole bunch of other people. We had bands. I got to talk. My band, Words Such as Burn, played, which was a lot of fun, including it was very enjoyable to play Imagine at a military base. And it was just a fun day overall. And so we gave free meals away to troops and their families. And so it was good to be able to get that out there and support the troops who were supporting us.
Very cool. So you did that, and then you decided, I didn't have enough of that, so I went on to the Raising Rally.
Yeah, and that was a similar type situation, except in that case, really, it was other people who had the idea of doing it, and my foundation was the primary financial sponsor. We put in a little more than half of the money to make the event happen, and Dave Silverman and his team really did all of the main legwork. I helped a little bit, especially at the end, and provided some oversight, but I got to give the hat tip to them. And that's, frankly, that's kind of the model I typically do. I try to stay at a strategy level and a financing, investing level, and leverage the organizations out there in the movement to, use their employees and volunteers to get the legwork done. And they did an awesome job. They did a fantastic job, and we had a lot of fun that day. Man, that was an absolute blast. It was one of the most fun days of my life, and getting to see all those wonderful speakers and talk with them, and then getting to give a speech in front of 25,000 people on the Capitol. It was just a unique opportunity. And then, frankly, the most fun part was immediately after my speech, Bad Religion took the stage.
Oh, yeah.
And I got to dance right behind their speakers with my kids and my wife and my parents and some friends. And it was just a good old time back there, dancing away and rocking out on stage. It was really cool.
Yeah, we had the lead singer of the Bad Religion on the show, and he was here in Atlanta. I don't know, back last year.
Yeah, Greg's an interesting guy.
Oh, yeah, he's really good. We just hung out with him right when he got into town at his hotel before he had to leave to to go downtown and play. And it's kind of funny because Bad Religion was playing in the same venue that I had my wedding at, so it was kind of cool.
Oh, that is cool.
Yeah, I said, hey, say hi to my quote-unquote church.
He's actually the guest on the podcast I co-host, the Humanist Hour.
Oh, very cool.
This month's episode.
Oh, very cool. He's a great guy.
Yeah. He was cool. We talked to him. We talked to their founding bass player who's still with them, Jay Bentley.
Oh, cool.
For a while too.
I didn't get to see him, but I got to hang out with Greg for a little while. It was very cool.
Yeah, good times.
So that brings us to you being the money guy, and we're going to talk about a little bit about money next, which is you have this fundraising you're involved with right now.
Yeah, so I'm the international team captain for the Foundation Beyond Belief team. And what we're doing is the Leukemia and Lymphoma's Light the Night walks, which they have about 185 walks across the U.S. and Canada each year. And people from the U.S. and Canada can take place in the walks personally by actually walking, or can join online and do it virtually. But also anybody anywhere in the world can go online and join our virtual team and raise money for it or donate. And it's been pretty cool. What we're shooting to do this year is a first for us and as well for Leukemia and Lymphoma Society. We're trying to raise $1 million in our very first year.
Wow.
And
that's ballsy. I know how fundraising goes. That's ballsy.
It's a big goal. It's a stretch goal for sure, but I think we could do it. There's a huge movement where we're focusing on leveraging the free thought movement specifically, but we're welcoming anybody to our teams, Christians, Jews, anybody who wants to take part and raise money for a good cause. We are going to be inclusive of everybody. Our allies for the project are enormous. I could list them all, but it takes a while. But we've got people from JREF to American Atheist to American Humanist to the Richard Dawkins Foundation are all behind this effort and encouraging their people and members and chapters to take part. And it's pretty neat. So our first goal was to get 100 local teams at their walk sites. So out of 185, we want to get at least 100 teams in our first year. And so far, we're at 79, and the walks don't actually take place till the fall.
When did the actual walk happen?
They're between September and through November, and the actual date depends on the city you're in.
Okay.
And so we've got 79 teams so far and counting, which is absolutely awesome. So kind of, as far as I know, nothing like this has ever been done before in our movement on such a wide scale, and people really seem to be taking to it. We're really thrilled to have so many teams already, and we're hoping by the time the actual walks happen, we'll have another 30, 40 more.
Yeah. So what is the deadline before people can actually apply to be involved?
Well, the deadline to actually walk would be registering before your local walks. So people would want to go online and join up, but I would recommend doing it as soon as possible, because really we're just getting into the key fundraising season now. You want to do most of your fundraising beforehand, and where another way this is a little different is we're certainly trying to get donations from humanists, atheists, and skeptics. A primary thrust of this is for us to get donations from our friends and family to go out and do what other people do for the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society is, hey, I'm taking part in this walk. Will you sponsor me? Will you do a donation to this great cause? And we hope that we'll be able to get a lot of people joining us, not just to walk and not just to donate, but to actually fundraise for us and go out and help raise money to, promote science and promote education and fight against a nasty disease that has pretty much affected all of us in a variety of ways. And if we can unite together, which we're doing right now, we could do something amazing and get $1 million. And one thing we're doing as part of that is my family is doing a matching challenge. So up through the first $500,000 raised, we'll match it dollar for dollar. So essentially, if we can raise $500,000 as a movement, it automatically becomes $1 million, and we hit our target.
Hey, that's not as now. It's not as ballsy as it was at the beginning. It's half as ballsy.
It's one ballsy.
Yeah, there you go. Just one.
It's a Cyclops goal.
That's very cool. So where do people go to find out all the information they might need to do? Like find if there's a place locally that's already doing it. If there isn't one, can they apply to like host one in their city or town?
Absolutely. Anybody can start a team, and right now we're shifting to walker recruitment mode, but we absolutely would be thrilled to get more teams in. We want to get at least 21 more teams, and are really hoping people will form new ones. So where you can see the list of current teams and join up with them is at pages.lightthe.night.org. Light the Night is one word. So pages.lightthe.night.org/2012/FBB for Foundation Beyond Belief.
Is it Light the Night with the fancy LITE, or is it the real way? Do you spell it?
LIGHT.
Right.
So pages.light, LIGHT, thenight.org/2012/FBB. And you can also find a ton more information on it, specifically if you go to foundationbeyondbelief.org/LLS. And on there you can find out about the whole program. You'll learn that our honored hero for the year is Christopher Hitchens, so we're doing it in honor of him. You can see who all our allies are, and there's detailed instructions on how to form teams, how to join teams, and also how to join the virtual team. Because again, you don't have to be anywhere near a walk site to contribute, to take part, to raise money. And I guess one other thing we should mention is that we have an incentive program, and we actually have awards in place where the top fundraising teams, both in terms of total dollars raised and average dollars raised per team member, win prizes. And so my foundation's doing this where we are giving out the first place team in each of those categories will win $5,000, where they can keep $2,500 of it for themselves and then give $2,500 of it to a national organization that they're affiliated with, or more than one. If they're affiliated with more than one, they can divide it up equally or however way they want. So, I mean, not only is this a great way to get out, be public, interface with your local community, do something really positive and fun, it's also a way you could possibly win money for your local group and your national group. So there's a lot of really cool aspects to this. And, you know, a lot of times we spend a lot of time debunking falsehoods and a lot of time fighting against ignorance in government. But this is just something really positive, fun, and enjoyable we can get out there and do to make a difference in the world and raise $1 million and break down some misconceptions about who we are and what we believe as a community.
There's nothing wrong with that at all. I wholly endorse that.
Thanks, man. So to all the listeners, please sign up. Get out there, join a team, form teams. You know, if you're thinking, other people do it, nope, no bystander effect here. Be aware of it. Just jump in and actually do it. Encourage your friends, encourage your local groups. Skeptics, free thinkers, religious people, and allies are all welcome. We're trying to do this together, leverage our extended networks, and raise $1 million. And this is year one. We plan on making this a tradition to help bind our communities together and really form relationships and accomplish goals united.
I will put all the links in the show notes so people can go there and head off and find out more information about who's in your local area to make this happen.
Awesome, man. Thanks so much.
No problem. Thanks for coming on the show a little bit.
Absolutely. Anytime.
So today I have with me Mark Edward, not Mark Eckwards. There's a difference between those two last names, I think. Maybe.
Yes.
Are you a different person?
Yes, I am.
Are you sure?
I've been, as long as I can remember, I've been different.
Now, tell our listeners a little bit about yourself, just in case I haven't, seen your name before. If I think many of them might have, because you're been featured on many skeptic resources all over the place. But tell people a little about who you are.
Okay, well, I started off as a magician. My grandfather was a magician, so I learned a lot of deceptive skills. As a child, I was his guinea pig for his magic. He was into sleight of hand and cards. So I grew up with magic in my life, and both my parents were artists. That was a nice plus. And as I grew older, then I got into music for a while and did some music, and went from that to art school at Cal Arts. I went to Cal Arts, and when I was in Cal Arts, I was doing performance art and sculpture and electronic music and some other things. So it was a varied batch of underground kind of offbeat things. And so what happened, this is before performance art was even really, anybody knew who it was. Back then it was called happenings, but they were kind of flash mob type things and activist type things, because that was the late 60s. So I did that, but I realized that it was very abstract and surreal stuff I was working with, and I realized I really couldn't make a living at it. I could do it, but there was no way I could make a living. So I kind of fell back on magic. I started doing magic full time, and that just took off, and I haven't really looked back since then. So, but magic led to mentalism, because I really wasn't really that into regular, bunny out of the hat magic. I thought it was kind of meaningless. If you change a rabbit comes out of the hat, so what? It's cute, and you can do kid shows. But mentalism came along, which was, this was at the time when Geller was up at Stanford, and everybody was talking about him, and it was quite interesting because, bending silverware and metal and all this, I started to see that people really, really took a shine to that. Whereas if you did clever sleight of hand, they said, oh, you're really good, you must have practiced for years. But if you read their mind or pretended to, they would really light up, and because there was a belief core under, some people believe that those things are possible. And I guess in a way at that time I did too. I was very interested in Geller and what he was doing, and I went to a lot of seminars. The more seminars I went to, the more I realized how strong mentalism was as compared to the standard magic. So the mentalism, after doing many years of trying to refine that, led into me being asked to be one of the mediums at the Houdini Seance Room at the Magic Castle, which is a great honor. And I had really good teachers who were top of the line. So I did that for 14 years. Now, out of that, just because it's expected in the persona of a medium, you need to know how to do a little bit of readings, or you need to understand the paranormal aspects of what you're talking about. Otherwise, you don't come off as credible. And my whole thing was to try and be as believable as possible. And I never did disclaimers when I was a mentalist, because I thought that kind of threw everything off. And in the seance room at the castle, it's basically about a 50-minute play without any breaks. So you really, you have to put this persona over. So I started doing readings, a little bit of palmistry, some tarot, just to warm people up. And I realized I really need to know what I'm doing. So you have to have credibility. And so it took a lot of study, but I went in that direction. All right, so I'm catching up to now. So after doing readings for a couple years and really enjoying it, I found out about this. This was like in the 90s, late 90s. The Psychic Friends Network was just starting. And a couple other people I knew who were readers said, oh, you could make money at home just giving people readings over the telephone. So that was a whole segment of my life. I didn't do it full time because I had lots of other things going on, but it supplemented my income, because I could work anytime I wanted, day or night, as many hours as I wanted. And what I saw as I worked with that was it was such a scam, and there was so much bull crap going on, and it was so easy to just listen to people and let them tell me their problems and then just use common sense. So I kind of prided myself in not being a woo psychic. I just basically told people the truth as I saw it. And I started to become really successful, and I had regular clients, and and I never said I was a believer, and I never said that I'm getting this from any sort of spirit world or any of that. I just told people, here's what you need to do. Here's what I see. It's purely intuitive. So then I said, this whole time I've been reading and watching a movie called Nightmare Alley over and over, because it's about a guy that starts out as a sideshow mentalist and climbs all the way to the top and then goes all the way back down to the bottom in the end. But we won't go into that. So I said, you know what? This is so easy. Basically, I got a letter from Psychic Friends that said one day in the mail, it said, "We're looking for the world's best psychic." And I said, no problem. I called him right away. I said, I am the best. What do you need? So that led to pretty much getting to the top of the dung heap, that was that marketplace. And I did an infomercial for them, which was just totally outrageous, the things that they did and how they manipulated the audience. But I was on the inside track, and I was gathering information. Also, when I was on the 900 line, whenever I would get what I would call a real zinger, and that would be somebody calling in with just such an outrageous story or a really compelling, dramatic premise, it would stick in my mind, and it was like, wow, you got to do something with this. So I started putting those stories into a computer file. So after 9.5 years, I had a lot of material just sitting, waiting. So that's where I'm at now, is what I did is I took the information from my background and what I had learned, not only from the Psychic Friends Network, but also I worked in a spiritualist church for a while and did a ton of celebrity parties, because I was getting really well known as being, in touch with some sort of supernatural power. But I let them carry me along, and I never made any claims. So that's where I'm at now, is now Psychic Blues, and we can talk about the meaning of Psychic Blues and how I got it, because I think it's a real interesting term that both the psychic community and the skeptic community aren't really aware of. So would you like me to define that?
I was about to say, it's like,
okay.
You kind of describe what the book is actually about, because everything you said there is pretty much the first couple of chapters of the book.
Oh, that's right. You have read it, so you know.
Yes.
Okay.
It gave me a pre-release, so everybody will get to see. They get to read it themselves when it comes out. It's a couple months from now.
Well, you got the scoop, because the publisher, Feral House Books, they do really wonderful books, and the design and everything has just been really...
Oh, the fonting and everything is really good in this book.
Yeah. They do a really good job, and they've changed. Unfortunately, they've changed the publishing date 3 times. I think it's because the publisher does 4 or 5 books at one time. But now it's done. It's at the printer at this very moment. So I'm anticipating, hopefully in the next couple of weeks, I will actually have my hands on the books, because I'm trying to pressure a little bit of, how can I put it? I've started my own book tour, which will start on July 1st. So I keep sending the publisher, well, I'm going to be here, and then there's Tam, a couple of thousand people are going to be there. So I'm kind of telling him, nudge, nudge, But there's really not much I can do. I'm in that waiting period. It's like having a child. I just have to...
You're the purgatory of publishing.
Yeah, it's like the watch pot never boils. So turn away and get involved in something else, and boom, there it'll be in the mailbox. That's about the best I can do.
Now, basically, you said you kind of described it, the first couple of chapters of the book, and there's a lot more detail in the book. There's some really interesting discussions you had with your, I guess it was like the boss of the Magic Castle at the time, where, talked about, wanting to do more costumes and things and all that.
Yeah, they wanted me to wear a turban, and it's just, and I was kind of reticent to do that, because I was going for a more, it took about 10 years to really develop the medium persona, but I was trying to make it, believable. And the fact of the matter was that the Magic Castle, they're not behind that. They want it to be kind of funny, goofy, and so they wanted me to wear this turban, and it just, and it's funny because one of the guys who's up there now, I was talking to him because I was working the castle a couple of months ago, and he's really great, but the same thing happened to him. They asked him to start wearing a turban too, and he was like, what? So, things happen where if something gets a little bit too believable and too real, people tend to pull back, because I think the sitters in the seance, they don't really complain. They just come out of the room like shocked, and that's one of the things I learned, and I'm proud of it, is that, and it took years to develop this, but if at the end of a seance, if people applauded, then I felt that I didn't do a good job.
No,
because, when I was done, I wanted them to be completely, their jaws dropped and sweat and, like, wow. And then maybe as an afterthought, the little titter of applause might come because they're just so nervous they don't know what else to do. But that's not the direction that the Magic Castle wanted to go in, and I totally understand that, because they don't want to scare people away.
Well,
for me, I was taking the style of the Victorian seance at the turn of the century and kind of upgrading it, because if you really upgraded it to what the medium does today, I'd just stand in front of a television camera and do cold readings. So, and that isn't much fun either.
Well, yeah, but the Victorian era stuff is like the really nice, spooky, stuff that actually is creepy. There's two parts. There's a light seance, which is where you do mentalism effects to kind of open the door in the people's minds. Like, you can't just walk in the room and go, and now here's the ghost. People they won't come along with you. So you have to sort of build this ladder to take their disbelief one step at a time. And then after you've got them teetering on the edge of not knowing, then you do the dark seances the dark seance where everything is pitch black. And people's imagination just take it off. They take off with it and run with it. And that's the fascinating part of seance work, is it's a psychodrama. It's not just a magic show in the dark, if it's done right. Maybe you should combine the in the dark seance type stuff with the new fascination with eating in the dark and mix the two.
I haven't heard about that. Are you serious?
Yeah, there's whole restaurants now that do these. They feed you in the pitch dark, and all the wait staff actually use the night vision goggles, and you eat without getting to see what you're eating.
Where is that, in New York or something?
They have one in here in Atlanta. They have one in New York, in Chicago, places like that.
What's it called?
The one here is Eating in the Dark.
It sounds like a good book title, actually.
But yeah, so
that's fascinating.
Mix the two, just tell really, creepy psychic stories.
Well, actually, it would be perfect for, because what the Magic Castle would do is they have a special room in the castle, which was really great, because that was like my own room. I could do whatever I wanted in. But they serve a 5-course meal, and then they do the seance.
See?
They could serve the meal in the dark. I don't know, the castle crowd, there's a lot of drinking that goes on, so I'm not so sure that would work out. But that's interesting. I'll have to check that out. That's hilarious.
A decent idea, at least.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm sure a lot of people, probably one of their aspects that they're trying to push is that you can taste more in the dark or something than you can.
Probably that whole fallacy that, blind people can hear better and all that.
Sensory deprivation.
Yeah. Even though we've had a couple of people who are visually impaired, and they always say that that's not actually quite true. It's just you just pay attention more. That's all the difference is.
Exactly. Well, they probably serve them really lousy food, but they come away going, that was delicious.
Yeah, probably. This was last night's meal, but they don't know.
Yeah, exactly.
So, because it's funny you hit on something that I've heard you talk about in the past, and other people have said before, where you get a little controversial with skeptics because you like to, now and then, or quite often, like to take people on the ride and not just blatantly say this is all BS.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm number one, I'm an entertainer. And when I used to have agents that would book me for psychic parties, the part of the reason I think I was fairly successful with that is that I would always tell them, I'm a psychic entertainer, and I'm an entertainer first. Secondly, I might be psychic, because so many people that agents in Hollywood book for parties and events and catering and all that, they're shut-eyes. And shut-eyes, as you may know, are people who They're dyed-in-the-wool believers. They believe in, UFOs and Elvis, and, the list goes on and on.
I think Elvis actually was real.
Yeah, no, he's real, but coming back is the question. So they're believers, and because of that, they don't have the background. In other words, I've worked for huge audiences, and I've worked in the seance room and done all the rooms in the castle, and so my background is in entertainment, and some psychics are just downright gloom cookies. They're not, because they are self-deluded, or they're really into they've got a few testimonial letters under their belt, or they've felt they've helped some people. They feel like they can say whatever they want, and it's coming from some spiritual place. And sometimes it's really not very pleasant to listen to. So as a psychic entertainer, I want to be an entertainer first, and if there is anything psychic, that comes second. So, yeah, I wouldn't say I have a problem with psychics. It's just that I'm an entertainer. I want to be out in front of people because that's where I feel the best. And I feel I've gotten in a lot of discussions about disclaimers. I was in a group called the Psychic Entertainers Association, and I parted ways with them because at that particular time they were pretty much demanding that you do a disclaimer before your act. And to me, and I refer to my friend, a really dear friend, Doc Hilford, who's also a bizarrist and a seance performer, I asked different people what they thought about disclaimers for a book I was writing, and Doc Hilford said, doing a disclaimer is kind of like walking into a really fancy French restaurant, and right before they serve your food, the chef comes out and says it came out of a can, I mean, it takes something out of the believability, especially if you're doing a dramatic play, which is what a seance is, because you're telling people, don't really let yourself go, and don't allow anything to be believable, because I'm just making this all up. So I don't like to do that, because, and again, my issue with that is, for me, what do you call it? The stage is my disclaimer in those situations. In other words, if an agent books me to come out and do a mentalist act, that's what people expect. They don't expect me to educate them. Now, if I'm doing a skeptic demonstration or something, well, yeah, I will probably explain what I'm doing, and people know that since it's a skeptic show, that I'm not the real thing, whatever that may be. So the proscenium, that's the word I was looking for, the proscenium arch of the stage is in many ways my disclaimer. And even though when I do seances, many, many times people would come up to me afterwards and they'd say, how did you develop your powers? And I'd tell them the truth. I'd say, I read a lot of books. Which is true. It's not, I wasn't really saying that it came from supernatural. I read magic books. And I would sometimes say to them, this is the magic castle.
Yeah.
This is not the ashram. This is not the temple of Isis or something. It's called the magic castle. Do I need to tell you more, Because I want to tell people that, and here's another aspect of it, and I know this is going to sound wooish, but this is what it's about. Susan's giving me a dirty look. The thing of it is, it goes back to the whole idea. Do you like illusion or disillusion? If somebody is, when I try and do a seance on my own, I try and break it down into three things: believer, non-believer, and undecided, because then the energy, there's that word again, the attitude in the room is different for different people. So, and everyone comes away with something a little bit different. But it's not my job as a performer to challenge their beliefs. They may believe a little bit, they may not believe at all, or they may not care. So it's like if I'm educating people like I try to do whenever I do a skeptic show. You saw what I did at Dragon Con.
Yeah, now the funny part is, about to say, even when you do educate people and tell them it's all fake, you come out with some people who still believe it, because I had two people actually said, was he real? I mean, was that real? Because they thought that you, after seeing you, and even though you did disclaimers, there's some people that came up to me and they said they believed it. Yeah.
Well, but see, that's what now we're getting to the core issue of what psychic blues is about. Okay, This is the issue. This is what the book is really, to me, is what I'm trying to say. For example, Jim Underdown, who's the head of CFI out here in LA, he recently did the Dr. Phil show, and they asked him the same thing that Penn and Teller asked me to do, and I did bullshit. They said, we want you to come and read an audience, and then the real psychics will come in and read the audience, and then we'll compare and see who did better. So Jim, it was his first time doing that, but he's done a lot of studies, so he knows how to do a pretty good cold read. So he went in there, and he basically did a cold read, and he did really well. People were crying. 3 people in the group were crying when he was done. And as he said to me, he said, you know, it made me feel kind of weird. He said, it made me feel bad afterwards because somebody had asked him about their career, and he had just given them basically a common sense, what you would say to anybody if you were on the bus and they asked you, what should I do with my career, you know? He just gave them a from-the-heart reading of it, but he prefaced it by saying something like, I see you doing this, you know? And he told me he felt really bad because afterwards, you know, he had just given somebody some heartfelt advice and it helped them. So that's part of what Psychic Blues is about. It's nothing supernatural. It's just about people being able to talk to each other, which I think we've lost the ability to do unless we can charge for it. See?
Yeah.
So, and it's very sad. I mean, if I say in the book, if I went up to somebody in the supermarket and started telling me about what I thought of them based on their shoes and their jewelry and their body language, they would call security and I would be removed. But if I have a little sign that says psychic readings, they will line up and stand there for hours just to have 5 or 10 minutes to talk with me.
And give you money.
And, well, yeah, they will. And it's a hell of a lot more than what they would pay me to do a card trick, too. So that's the Psychic Blues. The Psychic Blues is I want to help people and I want to entertain them. But what I don't want to do is make them think that it's some sort of gift or, you know, it's a skill. It's not a gift. It's a way of dealing with people. It's no different than a psychiatrist or a marriage counselor or anything else. I just have all the little, you know, skulls and candles and little gewgaws on my table to make it seem like there's some occult thing going on, you know. That's what I don't like about it. So I love it and I hate it. And like palmistry for me, there's really nothing I like to do better than palmistry because, you know, you're sitting there with a beautiful woman's hand in your hand, and you're not necessarily telling them what they want to hear, although that's been the tradition. I tell them what I think they need to hear, and sometimes because I'm brutally honest, they may not be used to having people talk to them that way, and it's enlightening to them. They're like, wow, that's really dead on accurate, you know. And if you read the chapter called Celebrity Syndrome, yeah, that's really true. Like I've read for some pretty high power people, and in their life, you know, like somebody like Bob Hope, he's not used to having anybody tell him, you know, that you look tired or that you need to take more time off. You know, his wife may tell him that, but some guy who he never met 5 minutes before, you know, they're not used to that. And producers and agents and people who are used to telling other people what to do, when you do that, they just eat it up. You know?
And this brings me down to something that, you know, gets talked about now and then. Now, where do you sit on the whole argument where some people think that the roadside, you know, skeptics in little houses and have the signs out and things?
You mean psychics?
Psychics.
There aren't skeptics in little houses by the road.
Oh, that's true. Yeah. I said skeptics? Psychics.
That's right. Little skeptic storefronts.
Yeah, really. Hey, I wouldn't make any money at that either. But yeah, so those types of things. I mean, a lot of people think that those types of people should be held accountable for what they actually are doing, which is pretty much, you know, psychology. And it's like, you know,
I think they cross the line out a lot of times, and those people should be prosecuted. But for me, you know, the grandma that's reading tarot cards in a little storefront is not really as big as a threat as, say, Chip Coffee or. I mean, there's a world of difference there. And what I learned from working in a spiritualist church is these are just, you see an old woman, an old crone or whatever they're called, looks like kind of a witchy sort of woman who's reading tarot cards. It's because she's just a wise old woman, period. She doesn't have any link to any superior power. She's just somebody who's lived a life. She probably lived in Bulgaria and was chased around, Europe for 40 years of her life, and so she knows about people, and it's like talking to your aunt, Now, what's happened is that whole kindly grandma or aunt with the cameo and the, don't mention names. No, I mean the people who wear a shawl and. Like Rosemary Altea is a classic example. She's got that sweet English accent, and she looks like your kindly Aunt Jane or whatever. She's a frickin' fraud. Yeah. And if you see the Speaking to the Dead Penn and Teller episode, you can see how we caught her and what she was doing. So it's becoming harder and harder to separate the con artists from the people who may just generally, have a good heart and they're a people person,
No, you kind of went into that a little bit in the book when you talked about when they took down Miss Cleo.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, that was kind of a different thing, because you were talking about the 1-800 type scams, basically, which you were involved with for a little while as well.
Well, I wasn't involved with the scam parts. I want to make that clear.
Oh, yeah.
During the time when I did that, I was mentioning, I prided myself on being the anti-psychic, the honest psychic, which is a completely paradoxical term. But, for example, if somebody would call me and they would say, my husband's beating me, what do I do? Well, I had a list of 800 numbers of women's shelters and AIDS clinics and, you name it, helplines. And if I instead of telling them a bunch of psychobabble, I would give them an 800 number, and I'd say, you need to call this number right away, and they'd do it. So I was like a clearinghouse for people's blues and troubles, but I never tried to hold them on the line, and which is what eventually happened, is the 900 lines became so exploitive that they had all these different marketing ploys that were totally unethical, and you probably read about some of those in the book. And they made it so that you had to keep people on for a certain period of time. And I even tried to reason with the people who own the company. I said, look, if somebody calls me and I can answer their question in 2 minutes, then that person is going to probably call me back, because they'll know, number one, that if I just try and hold them for a half hour and I never tell them anything, they're not going to call back. See what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But if I tell them what they really need to hear, not what they want to hear, there's a good chance they'll become a regular caller. So the money's going to even out for you. Why do I have to try and hold them against their will for 25 to 30 minutes? And I wouldn't do it, So I became like the bad boy, and, it caused a lot of problems because I wasn't doing what the standard person is doing. The standard person is trying to keep people on as long as possible. And, even an uneducated person can tell when you're jerking their chain.
Well, you mentioned in there, like, they had the policy where you had to, spend, 15 minutes just telling them all these disclaimers before you do anything.
Yeah. Well, what they would do is they would say, you get free 5 minutes, and that got millions of people to call in. But during that 5 minutes, it was basically, if you want to talk to a clairvoyant, press 2. If you want to talk to a ghost hunter, press 3. And then you go to that, and it would say, now we have Doris, we have Jim, and we have Bob are on today. Do you want to talk to Jim, Doris, or Bob? So it went through all these things. So basically 4.5 minutes of that was taken up just to get to the psychic. So finally, when you got to the psychic, your 5 minutes was up and you were paying.
Yeah.
That's one of the things that tanked the company, because you can't do that. It's false advertising. So
it's stuff like that just just boggles my mind that I see it still happening now and then.
Oh yeah. In fact, the Psychic Friends Network now has a new network. And it's going to be interesting to see what happens when my book comes out, because they're not going to like it very much. But the thing is, when I worked for them, I had to sign a 10-year non-disclosure contract where they said, you can't tell anybody about how we do this or what we do. And I signed it, and that 10 years was up about 5 or 6 years ago. So, it's my story. So what can they do?
Yeah, you're in the clear now.
I hope so. Either that or I'm going to get a lot of really good, interesting publicity for a long time,
Well, because their new thing is that California Skype psychics thing, right?
Yeah, I forget the name of it. But and the interesting thing, a lot of people don't know this, and it's in the book, is that you see all these different 900 lines. One is called Keen, and one is called, the only certified psychics. I love that one.
Oh, yeah.
But basically they're all owned by the same couple of people, and they compete against themselves, just like, Procter & Gamble has different kinds of soap flakes. This one is better than this one, but they're all owned by the same people.
Well,
so you're basically paying the same conglomerate, no matter whether it's called the South Seas Psychic line or the, Top Psychics or whatever. They buy them up, because even if it's a small Psychic 900 line, they may not be doing very well. The big guys come in and just swoop them up.
Most of the time they do that so they don't get hit with monopoly problems.
Yeah. So it's all, and the same thing. I'm not exactly perfectly clear on this, but to go back to your question about the storefront psychics, I think that if you go to a particular town, I think a lot of these people are in sort of a little, I don't want to use the term syndicate, but they're in a little group of people that have like a protection thing or something going, because a lot of times you'll go by these storefront neon psychic places, there's nobody in there,
Doesn't look like it.
They're completely empty, and yet they're on here there's a lot of them in Hollywood, and they're on really expensive property. So the question is, how are they paying their rent? There's no line coming out of the door. You don't see people hanging around in front of it like you would at a good restaurant or anything. So then my question, and I have never really found out because I'm not sure I want to find out, what goes on in all these little shops, and how are they able to just pay their electric bill for all that neon when there's never anybody in there?
Well, so, I wonder if they also do moonlighting as, telephone psychics as well.
Probably, and you'll notice that they always have a back room. You don't see the psychic sitting in front of her crystal ball. They have a back room, so who knows what goes on back there.
Yeah, people go in through the back door so people don't see them doing it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You never know. It's part of the mystique.
Yes, the mystique of it's almost like, going into, it used to be when going into a porno shop, it's like, I better go around the back way. And I don't want to be seen going in to see the psychic, But I have to say, I've hardly ever seen anybody, and try and next time you drive by, I've never seen anybody go in or out of one of those places. Maybe once I have, and that's pretty unusual for any business,
Yeah, well, there's one that's there's one that's right near where me and my wife at the time weren't married, but when we were still dating and living together, that was like right down the road from our condo, and we still drive by it now and then. And since then, because we don't drive by it too often, and the other day we drove by it, we haven't driven by for the last couple of years, and they upgraded everything. And it's amazing to me because when I lived right next door, we never saw people go in or out. And I didn't still see anybody there, but yet now the building is nicer and bigger, and the sign is instead of these cheesy neon signs, they have one of those expensive wood carved signs. How is this person making all this money?
Well, they are making money. That's the explanation to that. They're making tons of money. It's just, I think they're in groups and they pool their money, something like that. So this whole business has completely gone through the roof, and the worse the economy gets, and we keep fighting more and more wars. That's the tradition in the psychic realm, is that when things are bad, psychics boom, and that's why the underlining title of my book was going to be The Golden Age of the Con, because I really think that we are in that now. We are in a time that is unparalleled in terms of scams and cons, and, I mean, it's...
I think you actually named one of the subheadings of one of your chapters that.
The Dawn of the Con or whatever.
Yeah, the Golden Age of the Con or something like that.
Yeah, because I mean, you just have to look around at what's going on, and everybody's got a scam of some kind, and they're all looking for a way to legitimize it, whether it's the banking industry or savings and loan or whatever. It's all a shell game, So and people want answers. They're like, what do we do? So if you hang out a sign that says spiritual advice, that's another line I love. Spiritual advice, That's a big pull, because everybody says, "Yeah, I'm spiritual. Maybe this guy can help me."
Wow.
Sad but true. What chapter did you like best?
To me, I love the Hollywood one the best, because it's all the stuff I've kind of known because I've been involved with Hollywood before. But yeah. I love to have that on a book form where I can point people to it, because people don't tend to believe that until you show them that these people all go to these people, and you hear about it, but it's like in passing or as tabloid speak, and people don't pay attention to it. And I think it's a fun thing for people to realize.
Yeah. I've read for some very interesting people who I would have thought would have a much more rational way.
Yeah.
It kind of lets you down a little bit.
Yeah.
Like when I read for Bob Hope, that was just. I was like, I should be asking him about my future. What can you tell me about what you see about me, Because here's a guy that's just, he's been everywhere and done everything. And then I've had like soap opera actors that are these just unbelievably, strikingly handsome guys and trophy wives, and they're just like all the rest of us. They're like, they're insecure, they're worried. I mean, I'm speaking for myself now. They're worried where their next meal is going to come from, and you just can't believe it. You're just sitting there going, why am I given this cachet to be... It's like having a passport to just, tell a person your wildest fantasies and see if they'll believe it. And that's one of the things I learned as a technique, is sometimes if you have, you can have a block where, say you've been working for 4 or 5 hours straight without a break, and you just have like a writer's block where you don't know what to say, you're just like, you're tapped out. But then somebody sits down who is really important. So one of the things I learned is you just start talking about your own life, and you make it about their life. And it really works. It's really magical. You just start talking about what's going on in your life, except it's theirs. And they like to go, wow, how did you know all that? You really hit on that one thing, And of course, the people in Hollywood I don't want to paint with too broad a brush, but they can be very superstitious, and a lot of times they'll be like, don't tell me anything bad. They're terrified to sit down, and their body language looks like they're going to have a root canal or something. And I have to tell them, first of all, you need to relax, It's like, I'm not going to tell you anything bad unless you want me to, and that's going to cost extra, because I don't really do that, So it's fascinating, and I again, some of the people I've met have just really, my mind has been totally turned around by just having 10 minutes alone with them, where I would have been just terrified to approach them, and they turn out to be people that are just, we're all more alike than we are different. So yeah, it's a good chapter. I wish that chapter could have been a little longer, but I didn't want to get into any litigious situations.
Wow. Yeah.
The editor took a lot out of that chapter, because I had a lot of dirt on some people, and it was kind of like, I don't think we want to go there,
Yeah, well, I mean, that's the advantage of you not being a professional medical person, because you don't have any real legal reason not to.
Yeah, and as long as I keep it in general terms, and I don't really, out somebody for something too terrible. And I've had some people just, a lot of times they will use that moment with you as a confessional type thing, especially particularly on the telephone. I had people, they'd say, I did something really bad, and I'd be like, oh, Jesus, what did you do?
Yeah, please don't tell me.
Yeah, I'm not sure I want to know. You need to call 800, Yeah, I mean, there are people that they would confess things that they did, and it was pretty scary. And that's another reason why I got out of that, is because I did not want to be caught in the middle of something that, the FBI would come and say, well, you talked to this guy on such and such a day. What did he tell you, And in fact, there are a couple of people who I did speak to. I can't be too specific about it, but later on, they were convicted of crimes and things like that. So that was pretty weird. I was like, oh, I remember that guy. He told me that that's what happened. And later I read about it in the paper. He's going to prison for 20 years for molesting a child or something. So, I mean, it's really not a good business to be in. People think it's very glamorous and, you must have, eating in the finest hotels, sleeping in the best restaurants. That's really what it's like. I mean, you're not riding so high, and it's amazing that people think that. I used to have people come up to me in the market. Oh, you're that psychic, blah blah blah. You must be a millionaire because you know the lotto numbers. It's like, right, sure, whatever you say.
That's when you have to say there's an educational moment right there. Okay.
Yeah.
If that's if you believe that, then when's the last time you heard about a psychic who won the lottery?
Well, that's what I tell people. They would call up and ask for winning lotto numbers, and I'd use an old line that mentalists used for years. I'd say, if I could do that, I wouldn't be talking to you on the phone right now. I don't mean that in a bad way, but and I'd always say to them, look, I can give you numbers, but I will not guarantee that they're winning numbers because that's just ridiculous. And they go, well, what good are you? I'm paying for this. Give me some numbers. And I'd say, okay, 5, 9, make up a bunch of numbers. And they go, thank you. So it's like, but I would actually try and inject skepticality into a psychic reading. And it was very challenging because sometimes people would really appreciate it. And they'd say, what are you doing on this line? You didn't really tell me anything, but you told me everything. And in other words, I didn't make it like a spirit was telling me. I just told them, this is wrong. What's happening in your life is wrong. This is what you need to do to change it. But some people just don't have that ability to think clearly because they're alcoholics or drug addicts or whatever. And they're not used to people talking to them that way. So in that way, that's the psychic blues. Is it good? Is it bad? I don't know. That's why I wrote the book, to try and see what direction it really goes in. I mean, I think for the most part, it's bad. But as you remember, if you read the book, I saved a couple people's lives. Right?
It really, that's one of the best parts about this book, is that it really makes you think about, especially as a skeptic, because most all skeptics were pretty much against this type of thing. Mm-hmm. And then you read some of those times where you're like, okay, but you saved people's lives a couple times. So how can we harness that part of the woo? For the good? And I think that's where I think more people should focus a little bit of energy at, because I think sometimes, yes, it's good to educate everybody about this so they're not falling into traps or spend too much money. But it again makes me think about, well, is there a way to harness some of that, because you can't change everybody's mind? Is there a way to harness some of it for the good?
Yeah, well, I think there is, and that's why I wrote the book. I think that, but the irony of it, and I love stories and novels that are about ultimate irony, is that, for example, the one time when I did save the woman's life, it was at a time when I gave her the reading where I had been on the phone for like 9 hours, and hers was the last call in the early morning hours of the day that I was on, because it used to go on basically from 1 a.m. till 8 or 9 in the morning. That was the prime time, because that's when the infomercials would run. So the one woman's story in the book, she called at like 9 in the morning, right at the end of my shift, where I was completely burnt out, and I just gave her like a rambling general reading, just as general as you could imagine, and didn't think anything of it. And then like 3 months later, I got a call from the company saying, you didn't know this, but she had a gun to her head, and Now she's in nursing school, thanks to you, you know?
Wow.
So, I mean, I didn't even set out to try and make a difference. I was actually just rattling off some. So again, that's the psychic blues. That's like, oh man, that person? And I was racking my brains trying to think who it was. Was it this woman who I spoke to and she seemed to be troubled? But she didn't seem to be that troubled, but there you go. She had a gun that was loaded and she was going to kill herself. So they received a testimonial letter saying, you know, bless him, you know, bless his gift. And, you know, it's like, wow.
Yeah. And what do you do with that?
How am I doing that? And,
I mean,
you know, that brings back the whole thing. It's just people talking to each other. So I don't think there's any magic solution or any way to, what did you say, navigate it or
harness it.
Harness it. I think it's just being able to talk to each other under a different umbrella than the supernatural. But unfortunately, the more supernatural stuff is on television, the worse and harder that's going to become. You know, I mean, all this paranormal investigators that say they're sciencey, you know, I mean, it's just muddying the waters and making it more and more difficult for people who have compassion. And believe me, they're, you know, I would say probably 98% of the people who I worked with, well, let's take that down a little bit. 90% of the people I worked with were pretty predatory, but there were 10% that were, you know, they're just little old ladies that have a kind heart. And I mean, those are the ones that they never get on Larry King, and they don't get a TV show because they just don't care, you know. They're just nice people.
Well, they don't make good TV.
Yeah, exactly. They don't. They're too honest to get involved with the Hollywood scene, and so it makes it even tougher to get that message out. So that's what the book is about. Is, you know, just take a minute to listen to people, you know, and that's the most number one thing. A psychic is just somebody who pays attention and listens, and if you do that for years at a time, you develop something that seems paranormal, but it's really just a natural outgrowth of just listening, you know. It's like, how many questions can you ask? Love and money, you know.
We've had many people on our show that have said the same thing. I know Lynn Kelly even invented her own version of a divining system, just completely whole cloth. It's insane. If you ever see it and you're a rational person, you say, this is crazy. But yet she does it. Even she says to people, it's all fake. Even when she disclaims it, she gets people all the time who want to pay for it, even though she says, I don't do it for money. And people hound her to pay for it. And it's like, it's just me screwing around. Why don't we just play Monopoly, which is just as legit? And it doesn't matter. It's just people.
Well, you read the part about the banana readings, right?
Yeah.
So, and that was completely off the cuff. One day I just decided I'm not going to use tarot or crystals or any of that. I'm going to just read bananas. The way you peel it is your past. The way you eat it is your present, and your future are the lines that I read on the inside of the banana. Yeah. And it was a big hit.
Yeah.
People loved it, and they not only got a reading, but they got a free snack, you know. So it was. But the other psychics that were in the church that I was working in, they thought I'd completely gone off the deep end, you know. But they were nonetheless very, not envious, but I think a lot of them were really jealous because I had a line just like them. So, I mean, it doesn't matter as long as you like to talk to people. If you don't like to talk to total strangers, then you just can't do it, you know. And that's part of what I write about, is that getting into it from a magic background, I think, helped. But I still know a lot of magicians who would love to be able to break into the field, but they don't have that you know, they just couldn't do a good reading to save their life because they're so used to fooling people. It's very hard to shake that, you know. When you're talking to them and you're coming from after you've just done a card trick or something, people are like, well, wait, no, you know, you just fooled me, so why should I believe what you're telling me now? So you have to kind of eventually make a decision and say, all right, I'm not going to do the SpongeBob bunnies right before I tell somebody about, you know, their married life.
Very cool. So where can people find you, your writings, your stuff?
Okay, you can pre-order Psychic Blues if it's not already by the time this podcast gets out. If it's not already available, you can pre-order it at Amazon.com. Just put in Psychic Blues, Mark Edward, and you'll see it there. And it's not an expensive book. I was hoping for a hardback, as every author does, but maybe later. See, again, this is the first imprint. So, yeah, you can get that. You can also read my writings at my Wikipedia page. I'm very proud of, thanks to Susan, who's a Wikipediatrician. And you can also go to my website, www.themarkedward.com. And that's got a shop with all my other books, which are self-published. Maybe one day they'll hit the market. But they're basically for mentalists and magicians and people who are magicians who want to make the, cross the line into the dark side. And then Skeptic Blog, I write for Skeptic Blog. I've done that since it started. And what else? Am I forgetting anything? Yeah, you can find the investigations at the IIG, that's iigwest.org. And you can read about the guy we just tested last week, which is just fantastic. I mean, for me, it's like finally in my life, all of my skills, or whatever you want to call it, or abilities, are finally being put to good use. I'm not just fooling people or saying I tricked you. Now I'm actually looking at people and learning to understand what they're doing. They really believe they have X-ray vision, or they can dowse or whatever, and it's fascinating work. So that's a big part of what I'm doing now. It's magic is still a part of my life, but at a certain point you say, what can I do with it to reach more people, not be so limited? So that's the IIG. That's a good place to check out too. That's pretty much it right now, which is a lot.
Yeah, you're not a slouch.
I'm working every day to try and get this. What I really want to do is, get on some of these network talk shows and challenge some of the people that have just been able to just skate through. Like if you get a chance to see that Dr. Phil show, I think Jim Underdown figured it out. He broke it down. He was on for a little over 8% of the hour. And the other hour was taken up by 4 psychics who were on center stage with Dr. Phil, and they had Jim Underdown, the skeptic, in the audience, which is already kind of like a slap in the face.
Well, that's an old theater trick.
Yeah, so it made him the outsider, and yet he was, he stands his ground. He was pretty tough, and of course the editors and the producers tilted it the way, even though they had told Jim Underdown that, Dr. Phil's probably a bigger skeptic than you. Well,
yeah, right.
Yeah. Anyway.
You knew that was not right.
The challenge is to get on some of these shows and say, look, this is not a gift. This is just a skill, like a good poker player,
That's when you bring your, these days with 4G, you get your cell phone and you live stream the damn thing so they can't, fake it later on.
Yeah, well, that's one of the things Jim learned is he's going to make sure that whenever he does another TV show, and right now there are a lot of people that are booking more and more paranormal shows out here in Hollywood, and they're asking for so-called skeptics, So we're being really careful. In fact, I got one the other day. I loved it. It said, looking for real paranormal investigators, and the word real was in caps, right? No, looking for real ghost hunters must be familiar with the equipment.
What does that mean?
Exactly.
Tell me what the real equipment is. There's no such thing because we...
That's right. It's a thermometer and a stud finder you use for finding things in the walls, and it's like, It's like,
if you can actually show me a ghost and show me how the machine works, I believe it's a real piece of equipment. Otherwise, it's just whatever it is.
Right. Yeah, but this is the thing that they are casting for, and they're looking for more and more of this. So, and as these guys get more and more sciencey, like they act like, yeah, we're using science. We've got this EMF meter right here. It really makes it. I don't know. Somewhere it's got to either stop or turn around. But I don't see any of that letting up, and that's really a challenge.
It always does.
Yeah.
Everything does.
The pendulum. We don't need a pendulum. We need a wrecking ball. Okay.
Well, when it happens, you won't need it, like everything else.
Yeah.
At one point, everybody needed a buggy whip. You don't need one anymore.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we'll hope that happens with some of this woo that we're immersed in.
Well, think about it. Think about how the different types of woo were popular at different times in history.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, when you were steeped in the era of like the Fox sisters, we could probably sit there going, "This go on forever." Not really.
Yeah. No,
So-
it tends to come back, and so do the people who promulgate it. You know, it's like now, what's his name? Peter Popoff is back, and Geller is, you know, although he never really left, he's still around, and so it just needs a little balance. That's all, a little balance. But I don't think my feeling is that people in Hollywood don't even know what a balance is, because they're just
They don't care. It's ratings for them.
Well, yeah, it's the ratings, and it's also the people who are doing the producing and the casting. They're like in their 20s. They never saw anything but paranormal television, so they don't. And we learned this when IIG went to Paracon, which is a convention of so-called ghost hunters, and we set up our table, and we had a lot of people come by who told us their stories, and they weren't even aware that there was another way to look at it.
Yeah.
In other words, they had been brought up with ghosts and demons and all this stuff, and we said, "Oh, that's just pareidolia," and they're like, "Para what?" And then we saw the light go on, and people were like, "Wow, you know, my friends just told me this is how it is, so I figured that's what it is." So it's really a challenge, because now it's sunken so much into the culture that it's just taken for granted. I have one of the places I work, I have a security guard. This guy is carrying a gun, right? And we got into a discussion. He's telling me about this ghost show that he watches, and he says to me, "What, that stuff isn't real?" And I look down, and I'm like, he's carrying a gun. It's like, no, it's not real. Oh, really? Wow, my wife and I are really into that. We watch it every week, and I'm like, oh man.
Oh no.
So, but this is the way to go. That's why I'm in the skeptical movement, because I love a challenge, and I love the idea of kind of being a little subversive. I like controversy. I'm not afraid to piss off some skeptics now and then. It's just part of what I do, you know. I'm an entertainer. I don't want anybody to be too sure about anything, you know, because I think that's part of being skeptical.
Very cool. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Oh, it was great. And I will see you at Dragon Con.
Definitely. Well, I hope you enjoyed this longish episode of Skepticality. May it satisfy you until the next episode, which will be July 31st. Make sure you head over to the show notes to find out about the things you just heard about at our website, Skepticality.com.
Hungry for more skepticism? Want to learn the truth about the scientific controversies of our time? Then subscribe to Skeptic, the quarterly magazine Stephen Jay Gould called the best journal in the field. To subscribe, visit skeptic.com today.